if the Council of Ministers stays with its current plan, then we have a chance to persuade the European Parliament. And if we can get the new Parliament to vote the same way the old one did, then it will not be clear, and there will be more steps to be done in order to reach a final directive, or maybe there will be no directive. So the fight will go on. Meanwhile, if we lose and a directive comes out that authorizes logic patents, it will be vital for Norway to veto this directive, because you can't write substantial software in a country that allows logic patents without your program infringing dozens or hundreds of patents. I used to say, look at your word processor. It probably has hundreds of features. Each of them is at least one idea, maybe several ideas together. And there could be more ideas inside that you can't see as features. So there are thousands of ideas in your word processor, thousands of things that might already be patented by someone else. So how is anybody going to develop a word processor? Well, the megacorporations can do it because they own a lot of patents, and they make other megacorporations cross-license with them. So only the megacorporations will be able to develop software. I used to ask you to just estimate that if there are thousands of ideas, there might be hundreds of patents. But now I don't have to ask you to estimate, because someone did a study. He looked at Linux, which is the kernel of the GNU/Linux operating system, and found 286 different US patents that cover ideas used in Linux. And Linux, someone else estimated recently at 0.25%. That is less than, it's a one part in 400 of the whole system. So how many patents would cover the whole system? We can roughly estimate 100,000. You can see that the details of the individual patents don't even matter. It doesn't matter whether they've been carefully examined. You know, if the patent office did a better job, maybe it would only have issued 50,000 of those patents. If it did a worse job, it would maybe issue 200,000, right? Does it matter? No. You can't solve this problem by looking at individual patents, just as you can't get rid of malaria by swatting mosquitoes. You've got to change the system. The system should not allow this kind of patent. If you want to help in this campaign, contact FFII. FFII is the leader in this. They've done a very good job. So look at their website, which is ffii.org, and then it'll tell you how to contact them if you want to help. There's also a site called softwarepatents.co.uk, which has a very clear explanation in English about the problem.
Yeah, could you possibly elaborate a bit on the cross-licensing system used by big software companies? You see there is a gentleman's agreement.
It's not a gentleman's agreement. It's basically, suppose, well, IBM wrote an article that you could read. It's in Think Magazine, issue number 5, 1990, which is about exactly this. IBM at the time had 9,000 US patents. So if some other company had a patent and said to IBM, you can't do that, we have a patent, IBM would say, well, let's look through our 9,000 patents and see what covers your products or your operations. And they would find some, and then they'd say, let's sign a cross-license. The cross-license is a contract that they sign, and it's normally a secret, so we don't see what these contracts say, we just know they exist. Where maybe one company pays the other a certain amount of money, and each one is permitted to do the things patented by the other.
Yeah, but the gentleman agreement thing might be that they say to each other that we license each other patents, so we thereby block out this free software. Is that not a possibility?
I don't know. IBM may not be trying to destroy free software. After all, they're using and encouraging their customers to use the GNU/Linux system. They don't call it that, they call it Linux, but it is the GNU/Linux system. So IBM probably isn't going to sue us. But on the other hand, even IBM can't stop everybody else from suing us, even assuming IBM decides to try.
Yeah, I'd like to raise another question. I mainly agree with what you said about the compensation of musicians and so on. I'm a member of the Norwegian Writers Union, and some of us there proposed a system for compensating writers, which is very like the one you said. In fact, we have most of the juridical things and so in place because we can use compensation laws created for the Norwegian libraries. But I'm a bit skeptical about the thing you said about taxation because of some experiences we had in Norway where the Department of Culture tried to make a tax which should compensate for copying, which would be a bit tax. That is, they should tax media that could store information according to how many bits they contain.
And what was the problem? Did they really do it, or did they just propose it?
They proposed it several times, and I wrote an article about it about 6 years ago when I said that in 5 years' time this means that a hard disk will cost you some $10 million or something like that. So my question to you is, I didn't get exactly what kind of taxing system you proposed.
I'm not proposing any specific one. Because I'm not saying we should do this. I'm suggesting it as a possibility.
Because this question of a bit tax has been raised several times.
Well, but please listen, you are talking about a very specific proposal.
A very bad proposal, not
right, but I'm not advocating a specific way to calculate it. But, you know...
Give us some help here.
Well, one idea would be that you could adjust the amount of this tax. You know, you could tax blank CDs a certain amount. And if later on another medium replaces, you know, people start using blank DVDs, you could tax that by a different amount. You know, you don't have to maintain a rigorous proportionality to the number of bits. It could be the goal would be to raise a certain amount of tax from society as a whole.
There has been a tax on blank CDs in Norway. About 10 years ago, you paid $20 for one CD. And I'm not sure how much of that got to the fund, but they stopped it because it didn't work.
Well, $20 for one blank CD was obviously a lot of money. And it's sort of ridiculous. If you compare that with the amount of money musicians get if you buy a CD, which is 4% of the sales price as an estimate, we could say, well, what is that likely to be? You know, that might be something analogous to $1 worth.
But the problem was that you had to pay this tax both if you wanted to copy your CD or if you wanted to make a backup of your own personal data.
Why is that a problem?
Well, it depends.
You see, if it were $20, that's a problem, of course. But suppose it were a smaller amount.
The $20 was the sales price of the CD.
I understand. The point is that making a blank CD costs so much more than it really should have cost. Clearly causes problems. But suppose the tax were smaller. Suppose the tax were, you know, like, suppose it were 20% of what the CD would normally have cost. Well, then suppose, and this applies, sure, this will apply regardless of how you use the CD. So this means that people who are writing some of their personal data will support musicians a little bit.
Well.
So what?
We have a tax on blank video VCR cassettes.
Yeah.
And that goes into something called the cassette fund, which does sponsor some music and it sponsors some
Sounds good to
filmmaking,
me.
and it also sponsors people writing about the salmon industry. So it actually doesn't.
So what? Is this supposed to be a problem? You see, I've never understood it. Some people seem to think that if backing up some of their data or software means that they pay a little bit of money to some musicians, that something evil is happening. I don't see any evil there.
Many years ago, I used to be a music journalist, and it's not true that, at least here in Norway, people don't make money from touring. You lose money on touring, and you do earn some money on record sales, but what you earn most money of is airplay, because every time the radio stations play your music, they pay a fee to something called Tono, and they compile lists of how much music
Well, I'm not proposing any change in that. That's commercial use.
Well, the problem is that this system is about as corrupt as the system, as the big music corporations. For instance, it's so made that way that...
Please, this seems like it's somewhat of a side issue.
We all know that.
The system may be good in principle but corrupt in practice, but that doesn't really change anything I'm saying.
We are running out of time, so I think we can only take one more question. So the last question.
I was pondering on your proposal to cut down the copyright time. I believe it's a good idea. This will have an application on commercial software, because the commercial software being sold is being an issue of copyrighted material.
Well, actually, for software, they usually restrict it much more with a supposed contract that they call the end-user license agreement. So, in fact, if those went out of copyright, it wouldn't change anything. Now, one could, of course, say that that there's one could restrict that by law, and perhaps should. Oh well, sorry. I mean, there's just.
I just want to know if there's anyone here from the government tonight who is here for educating themselves.
Would they stand us?
Well, I've got it. I have interviews to do, and I have almost 300 messages to answer, so I've got to go. Put the stickers over there. Just go there and take as many stickers as you can make good use of. If you want some of the key rings or pins, come over here to me.
I have a short announcement before everyone leaves. If you want to learn more about problems, Scott Collins from the Mozilla Project will talk next week, next Thursday, same time, same place, about the issues of intellectual property and how they affect us all.
Oh, very bad idea.
Another one, we in the Norwegian Unix User Group and our foundation are going to fund some work to try to affect the software patents. And if you have any ideas and want to help out, please contact me. Thank you. Just one more thing to say. Everybody who is under 26 would like you to become a member of ETN. And also I would like to say a few words about Stortinget. ETN skal arrangere konferanse på Stortinget og BUCD sammen med Venstre i midten av oktober. Så det er ganske stor ting der.